David, the biblical hero, took shape in stone by the hands of the most talented sculptor of his time, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. The artist depicted David at a pivotal moment in his life when he was facing a formidable opponent. The fearlessness of David is a popular subject in the visual arts. He is usually depicted either before the victory over the Philistine champion or after. Bernini's sculpture is much more dynamic, as it portrays David at the moment he aims and is about to throw his deadly stone. The face shows utmost concentration. Bernini used his own facial features.
As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead.
Bernini's David was the fourth and final full-size sculpture that he made for the original owner of what is now the Galleria Borghese in Rome. It stands apart from the previous sculptures in that it portrays only one individual, rather than two or more. But the particular story of the young David naturally also involves two people. Bernini didn't depict David's opponent, but he is still part of the composition as the sculptor intended you or me, as onlooker, to take his place. Here, Bernini plays an all-new game with sculpture, blurring its boundaries and literally engaging the spectator. Lifeless stone treads in the domain of the living, interacting with whoever faces David to elicit an emotional response. It was to be much more in your face than any previous piece of three-dimensional art. The effect of this is now lost because the statue is wrongly positioned. Bernini designed the statue to be viewed from a specific angle and never intended for it to be placed in the center of the room or viewed from all sides. The statue originally stood in the corner opposite the entrance of the room, so that when you entered it, you felt the gaze of David taking aim at you. Although Bernini's scheme is ruined now that the statue stands in the middle of the room, its anatomic perfection and concentrated tension more than compensate for the loss. At the same time, some imperfections have become visible that should have been overlooked when it stood against the wall. Later, the sculptor would remark,
"Everyone makes mistakes. Because I have produced more than others, I have also made more mistakes."
One such mistake is David's left heel, which is filled out with plaster. It is perhaps best to consider it Bernini's Persian flaw. For the pose of the legs and body, Bernini modeled the image after an ancient work that at that time belonged to the collection of Bernini's patron. When we compare David's right foot with that of the ancient statue, we can see how David seems to be entering our world, with his big toe protruding over the edge of the stone base. You'll notice that the Roman sculpture, a marble copy of a Greek original in bronze that is now lost, includes a tree lump that is both distracting and necessary to carry the weight of the body in stone. Bernini came up with an ingenious solution for his David. Shortly before the encounter, David had received armor from King Saul. He tried on the armor and said,
"I can't move with all this stuff on. I'm just not used to it."
Without armor, he went to meet the enemy. Bernini used the discarded armor to turn it into the necessary support. And then there's the harp between David's feet. That recalls the fact that David composed many of the Psalms, songs of praise to God. The story goes that Bernini, about 40 years later, came to see his David and the previous statues with a friend. At that time, he was still actively working as a sculptor, but faced with these masterpieces of his youth, he exclaimed,
"Ah, what little progress I have made! Just look at how I treated marble when I was young."
Clearly, he was proud of the works he had made when he was only in his early 20s. And I believe most would agree that he was not mistaken.